Hello, my name is Robert from Mobile Burn, and today I wanted to give you a comparison between the Sony Xperia Z and the HTC One. So before I start talking about both devices, I just want to say I'll try and make these more entertaining now. I know I've been reading it sounded like I've been reading off a spec sheet and just sort of telling you, sort of the boring bits about the apps in the UI and stuff and of both devices. But I'll try and make it a little bit more entertaining this time with the HTC One, and I'll hopefully, see what your comments are, and hopefully you like the style of this comparison. Before I've read, like I said, I've always try and read your comments, and I always try and sort of, bounce off the feedback that I'm getting from you, viewers, and try and sort of change it around. And like some people have been saying, the reviews have been too long. So like I said, I'm going to try and chop it down a little bit, cut it down, and sort of concentrate on the more important things on both devices. Looking at button placement, you can see here the Sony Xperia Z has the volume rocker and the power button on the right hand side, as well as the SIM card slot right above that. And then there is also the speaker on the left hand side here, whereas the HTC One only has the volume rocker at the top, and the volume rocker is actually quite flush compared to the sort of big standing off one on the Sony Xperia Z. And the HTC One, that's pretty much it on this side. I'll sort of try and show you that separately. You can see there's nothing else here. Then looking at the top of both devices, there is the 3.5mm headphone jack covered under this flap on the Sony Xperia Z, and the 3.5mm headphone jack here on the HTC One. Then the HTC One has the power button at the top here, which doubles up as a tele remote. And then on the left hand side of both devices, you can see the micro SD card expansion slot, the dock connectors, and the charging port on the Sony Xperia Z, whereas the HTC One literally just has the SIM card ejector here, or the SIM card tray here. And the bottom of the device, there is literally nothing apart from the lanyard on the Sony Xperia Z. Let's see if the camera picks that up. There's just a lanyard connector here, and then you have the charging port for the HTC One down the bottom here, and this is slightly off center. And as I said in my review, I'm really liking this because it's just so much more comfortable to hold the phone. Then the front, there's a 2.1 megapixel camera on the front. It's just got the speaker grills here, and then the hardware buttons here, where it's just a home and a back button. And then the back has just got the 4 megapixel ultra pixel camera and the LED flash, and then just the Beats and the HTC logo. Non-removable battery, bearing in mind. The back of the Sony Xperia Z has the 13 megapixel camera, the LED flash, the Xperia branding, then some gibberish down the bottom here. And on the front, it has the Sony logo here, then the earpiece here, and the front-facing camera here of 2.2 megapixels. Now, talking a little bit about the specs on both devices without getting into too much detail, they're pretty evenly matched in terms of GPU. They actually have the identical GPU. RAM-wise as well, they have the same amount of RAM, 2 gigabytes. Battery-wise, they're pretty similar. The Xperia Z has a slightly larger one by 30 milliamp hours, from 2300 on the HTC One and 2330 on the Sony Xperia Z. The display resolution, they're both 1080p screens, although the HTC One has a smaller 4.7 inch, whereas the Sony Xperia Z has the large 5-inch display. So the HTC One actually has a much higher pixel per inch count. Front-facing cameras also identical as I just mentioned earlier. They both shoot 1080p front and back, and the back actually shoots 1080p HDR videos. In terms of OS, both are running 4.1.2, and you won't be able to get your widgets on your lock screen on either just yet, but both upgradable to 4.2.2. The HTC One actually runs HTC Sense 5, whereas the Sony actually runs a sort of sleeker version of the Sony's Timescape UI. The differences on both devices, the HTC One actually has a much more powerful CPU, the Snapdragon S600, and it is a quad-core processor still. The Sony Xperia Z has a 1.7 gigahertz. The HTC One has a 4 megapixel, ultra pixel, whatever you want to call it, resolution on the back, and it actually does much better noise performance in low light, which means the grain is going to be much smaller and much less visible if you're taking pictures in low light. This has got a 13 megapixel camera, and the pixels are going to be that little bit smaller because obviously it has the much denser sensor on the back. Another thing to note as well in terms of the differences, this actually supports the 802.11ac, the new Wi-Fi standard as well. Both still have NFC, so both you can still, bump the phones to share content. You'll be able to pay using Google Wallet, using NFC as well. So, there's not much difference there. Both have the Bluetooth 4.0 A2DP profile as well. In terms of software, the HTC One has the HTC Sense software running, and it comes now with this Blink feed here. You can see where you get your Twitter feed, your Facebook feeds all here. Then you also get your normal home screen where you can place, widgets, apps, and all the rest of it. Other than that, it's just a standard UI that you get or on Android, and also HTC Sense have their own widgets included, but most of the other stuff is exactly the same, and you still get to pinch to zoom in, and then you can add stuff to the home screen, so nothing special there. The button layout here, you can see there is only a home and a back button, and the way these buttons are being used, if you double tap, it actually goes into your multitasking, and if you long press, it actually goes into search Google Now. The Sony actually runs the Timescape, but it's sort of a lightly skinned version of the Timescape before compared to the previous versions. The previous version were much more sort of heavily themed. These ones aren't too bad. Now, comparing cameras on both devices, I already mentioned the megapixel count on both devices, but what HTC have actually introduced now is the HTC Zoe, and this basically allows you to take pictures and motion pictures as well. So if you go into your camera, it will actually take a picture and then take a sort of 2-second video with it, and this will allow you to have it sort of nicely organized in your gallery. But also other features compared to normal HTC Zoe, you get the sort of normal camera features, and you get your standard night vision, night picture scene mode, HDR, sweep panoramas. You'll get your standard sort of adjustments where you can adjust the ISO, the white balance, the continuous shooting, the camera options where you can add the geotagging, face detection, smile capture, the shutter option so you can, turn down the shutter sound, touch the capture. So if as soon as you press the point where you want to focus, it will focus. Auto upload, pretty much standard features that nowadays come on Android phones. But you can basically edit pictures, remove objects, change faces, and this allows you to, use the features that you most of the time would only get on powerful photo editing applications like Photoshop, like Lightroom. So HTC have really stepped up the game in terms of picture editing, where filters and all the other things that can be applied. Also video, you can shoot 1080p HDR videos with this, just like the Sony Xperia Z has actually introduced. This was the first phone in the UK anyway to be released with HDR 1080p video. And the quality as well, because this is a 4 megapixel camera, the picture quality is going to be much better in lower light, as I said previously, because the pixels are just that little bit bigger, and that allows for a little bit more light to be captured compared to, say, a more densely populated sensor like the Sony Xperia Z. Looking at the Sony Xperia Z camera, you can see here there are lots of different modes like superior auto, normal video modes, picture effect, sweep panoramas, all that good stuff. But also you get a lot more customization options. So you can have here, the shutter sound can be turned off. You can change the resolution, the white balance. You can also have the exposure compensation go up. Focus modes can be changed from tracking, burst modes, ISO, image stabilization, metering. So Sony have really focused their attention on the sort of details that photographers or people who use DSLRs and cameras with manual controls can actually now use this phone as well, in terms of adjusting the settings to how they want it. There are self-timers and things like that. Again, this is too long to go into in this video, but the attention to detail in terms of the adjustability and the manual controls are really good on Sony's part here. Camera quality wise as well, the Sony Xperia Z and the HTC One are pretty much on par in broad daylight, but as soon as it goes into nighttime, the Sony Xperia Z can't live with the HTC One in terms of performance in low light. Now, looking at the displays on both devices here, you can see I've got the same picture open on the HTC One as well as the Sony Xperia Z. And if I bring them up to the camera a little bit more to give you a better comparison here, because the problems have been with the HTC One, with the Sony Xperia Z, sorry, having really washed out colors once you start tilting the device, because the viewing angles are really bad. You can see frontal here, the colors that look pretty much identical. it's difficult to tell maybe through a computer monitor and through, you know, recording this on a camera, but the HTC One colors just seem that little bit punchy, a little bit more vibrant. They seem that little bit more washed out on the Sony Xperia Z. The HTC One has really, really good and really nice color reproduction. Display technologies, the HTC One actually has an SLCD3, so it's even better than the HTC One X. And this actually only has, the Sony Xperia Z has the 16 million colors TFT last generation screen, so you're not going to get the sort of same viewing angles and color reproduction as you would on modern display technologies. Also, speaker comparison, the HTC One actually has a really poor and flat speaker. You can see the speaker grills here, and that literally is all you get. This is a tiny speaker with very, very poor quality, and the reason probably this has been done is for water protection or protection against water. And if they had included any bigger, then more technology had to go in it, and probably the speaker quality would have been better, but the phone would have been a lot more expensive. The HTC One doesn't have the sort of waterproofness, and the speakers therefore are much bigger and much better. And so far, from what I've read and heard as well, testing the two devices, these are the best speakers you can get pretty much on any handset right now. I'm now going to run a few benchmarks just to compare the sort of performance on both devices. I've installed 3DMark, which is FutureMark's graphics performance testing sort of app, and I'm going to run them both, and I'll come back to you when the scores are in. So this is the Sony Xperia Z on full sound, 100%, fully turned up. And there you can hear the HTC One. Hopefully you can hear that over my voice. So the Sony Xperia Z is clearly worse than the HTC One in terms of speaker quality, but I just thought I'd show you that now while I've got this running, and sort of don't infringe any copyrights either. So the results are in. Here's the HTC One, 9,884. And the HTC One is 7,994. So the HTC One wins this comparison. Next, I'm going to run Quadrant and show you the scores on both. So the results are in. You can see the HTC One score here of 12,392. You can see that here comparing it to the HTC One X score, which is a lot less. And here is the score of the Sony Xperia Z, which is 7,926. So you can see the Snapdragon S600 much more powerful here. And then the last benchmarking test I'm going to run is Geekbench. So the Geekbench results are in. You can see here 2,653 and 1,984 on the Sony Xperia Z. So again, here shows the more powerful processor, the Snapdragon S600 on the HTC One. Then last couple of points. First one's call quality. The Sony Xperia Z is really, really quiet when it comes to sound quality. I have the latest updates, and even the loudspeaker seems very, very quiet. The HTC One, on the other hand, very loud, very powerful, obviously because of the two big speakers here, but also just when you hold it to your ear, it is a very, very good sounding speaker. And then battery life. The Sony Xperia Z actually has a very good battery life if you turn on stamina mode. You do lose the sort of ability to get push notifications, so if you don't care about it, you know, use it. But there's actually the option in the settings to turn on stamina mode, and basically this disables data as soon as your screen's off. The HTC One, on the other hand, has a better battery life than the Sony Xperia Z, even without stamina mode enabled. There is something called the power save mode, which is at the top here, and you can enable this and it does the same thing, turning the data off. The one thing I have found, as I said in my review, it actually turns off the data, and when you turn the screen back on, it takes a little bit to get the data back on, or doesn't even turn it on. So do bear that in mind, but the battery life on this has been absolutely amazing. I've started my day at like 7 or 8 in the morning, and connected it again to a charger at 11 p.m. and it was still charging, and it was still sort of 25 to 30% left. But that really concludes this comparison. I hope you enjoyed this sort of different style. I know I've sort of still, talked to you about these things, but I didn't want to go into too much, details talking about apps and, comparing lock screens and stuff like that. Most of the phones nowadays, if you, familiar with Android, you'll know what they look like, you know what you can do. But I sort of wanted to talk a little bit about other things. So thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please give us a thumbs up. Feel free to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. If you have any comments, queries, please leave them down below. I always try and read them, always try and, take them into my next video. And thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video.